What? Here we go.
Here we go. Yeah, hey, you know, what I like about this is very little planning goes into it. And so it really bubbles up to the top what you have really been impacted by and have been thinking about over the
Yeah.
last, week or two, however long it's been since we did the last one. And so I don't know. It's probably a good some psychologist or something should probably like review all of our podcasts and kind of do a deep dive into, the mental state, at least of me. I don't know how you
Yeah.
feel
What's
about
wrong with us?
it. But it's like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. But anyways, welcome back to Color Purple. What's going on your way?
Coalition Purple.
What did I say? Color Purple?
Color Purple.
I think that's a book.
Yeah. A movie, a play, a book,
A
many
book, or
things.
yeah, right, right. I actually read that book now that I think about it, and I saw the movie, I think.
Yeah.
Anyways, Coalition Purple. As you can see, it's been a kind of a wacky week.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
Anyways, how is this going
I
your
was
way?
just, oh, sorry, I was talking over you, but I was just going to say, part of what you were saying though about the idea that there's the planning, there's not a lot of planning that goes into our conversations. I've always found that part to be kind of the funnest, the most interesting part of it is because it does force you to think about things. It's like, oh my God, this, Bill just said something that I hadn't thought about, or, that's really changing my mind. I thought I sort of had this thing sort of planned out in my head, but now there's something that's different. And so you because you're doing it live and we're on the air, you can't just sit there and stare. I can't just go
Right. Exactly.
for like a half an hour. You got to respond or you got to think. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of I think it's a good even when we first started doing the show. I think in a way it's like it's an exemplar for how conversation should be in that you should be open to listening to the other person and hearing
Right.
what they have to say and then even changing your mind if it comes to that. So as I say,
Absolutely.
I actually love that part of the show.
No, no, absolutely. And I don't know, in our small way, I hope that is what we're doing is trying to encourage others just to do it, whether they do it on air and make fools of themselves like some of us might do. Um, but just
On a
have those
weekly basis.
conversations. I mean, have those conversations with neighbors and all that. I mean, because again, I know you do the same thing. We have we know lots of different people across lots of different spectrums of life, and most people just kind of want to get along and live their life, and
Yeah,
they're really not on the fringes, and we continue to be, at least the media continues to be dominated by the fringes. And it's
yeah.
like, I think people are starting to reject that, which I don't know,
I think
maybe
it's a
I'm
good thing.
being way too optimistic, but I really do think they're starting to just, okay, this is silly. I'm just not going to listen to this stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as I say, get out, talk to people, listen to
Yep.
people. It's
Yeah.
a good way to go.
Yeah. Well, and everybody's got there's the thing of it is there's a lot of good ideas, and it's not like either one of us have all the great ideas, right?
Yeah.
And that's so true. So just hearing other people out, and that also goes back to because of all the stuff that's going on again back to the national political scene, because of the change of horses in the on the Democratic side, it really has shortened really campaign season,
Yeah.
which I think has been a huge positive. I mean, and then we kind of touched on this a while back, but I think the best thing, at least from a national perspective, is if there's some way we could get to where a lot of European countries are, and they have a very short political season, you know,
Yeah.
3 or 4 months, because you just get, I mean, you just get exhausted by the time election day gets here. I don't know about you, but I just get exhausted. It's like, I just don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you. And it's interesting that you brought that up because that was actually kind of one of the things on my mind because, and kind of looking at it from a different perspective. Because this election has been really different. I mean, the way Harris has gotten to be the nominee for the Democrats and her lack of campaigning I think it sets up an interesting, well, dilemma in a way for, just our country and our democracy as a whole. Because, I mean, if you think about how this has gone, first of all, the Democrats basically had no primary. And
Right.
then, so they more or less just appointed Biden. They said, Biden's our guy. We're not really going to have a primary. But then they just also suddenly decided they were going to get rid of him. Okay, now he's not the guy, and now it's Kamala Harris. Now she's going to be the one that's going to be running. So no primary, no one voted for Harris. They just said, this is the person, this is our party. And then once she's in place, she doesn't really campaign. She's not really talking to anyone. She's not really doing any interviews. She's not really doing any of those things. So I guess basically what it comes down to for me is, if she wins, what does that say about our system as a whole? If the Democrats can simply pick somebody, whoever they want, and then that person doesn't really have to campaign, but they win anyway. I mean, where are we? You essentially have a small cabal of people who just appoint somebody to really be a figurehead, because again, it's the whole thing with Biden. I mean, Biden is still technically our president, but
Right.
he's not. If he's not mentally competent to run for office, then he's clearly not mentally competent to actually be the president. So there's some cabal of people who are, advising, pulling strings, however you want to put it, who are not only running Biden, but are essentially now going to be running Harris. So if Harris wins, who's really even in charge of things? How do we
Yeah.
remedy that situation?
Well, and again, I think it's kind of the same on both sides, really, because I mean,
Yeah.
in effect, Trump didn't have a primary either, right? And
Well, no. Now I have to disagree with you on that one. There was a primary. I mean,
well,
he
there
went out
was,
and
there
they
was.
tried to kick him off some ballots in some places. I mean,
No,
just
there
because
was.
the Republicans are
But
incompetent and can't put up anyone against them who could win, that's sort of a different thing. But I mean,
but
the
but I
Democrats
think
really didn't have a primary, though.
yeah, but I think the actual it's sort of a difference without a slight difference, only in the respect of both parties have their machines that really do decide what's going on. And
Yeah,
I was actually fascinated by the fact I think the whole primary, and we'll have to do a fact check on this, but the whole idea of primaries is actually kind of a recent development. I mean, it was like what in the late 50s, early 60s when they started doing the primaries. And before that, it was truly party bosses
right.
deciding who was going to do it. So it's actually kind of a new, relatively new concept to begin with primaries. But the reality is, when you look at almost any candidate, at least at that level,
Yeah.
um, it's sort of in the bag who's going to be in most cases. I mean, Biden got to where he was because everybody felt he had paid his dues and he really should be the candidate back in 2020, right?
Mm.
Even though I don't think there was a lot of people really that excited about Biden
Yeah.
on the Democrats, because I was a Democrat at the time, and I was like, I mean, seems like a nice guy, but man, is this the person we really want to, drive the country forward? And so, I mean, I think that, I hear you about not having a primary. I think that, but it was one of those weird situations where I don't even know how you could have had a primary and still had enough time to campaign, because you do need some time to campaign.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, but I mean, my point is that because they basically shoved Biden down our throats,
yeah.
that's that whole period of time where theoretically Biden was, would have been
Mhm.
having a primary and being challenged, but the Democrats eschewed that. Well, after that took place and they were covering up the fact that, he wasn't really competent, which is another enormous scandal, then they just swap in Harris. But as I say, my point about Harris is that no one's voted for her.
Right. No, I agree. No, yeah, no, it was not pretty at all, to
No,
say the
I think it's
least.
pretty bad.
Right. I mean, I guess if the situation was turned around, and it was the Republicans, and now again, there wasn't a vice president in Trump's world that would probably step into that role, because Mike Pence certainly wasn't going to
Yeah,
do
no,
it,
no, nobody had
right?
any time for Mike Pence.
But if the all things were the same, and for a reason Trump was considered incompetent, which he probably is anyways,
Which I think many people probably do consider that. So, put that out there.
um, they would have probably done the same thing. It was just the Democrats did it,
Yeah.
first, but I think this, if all things had been more normal in terms of a Republican candidate, they probably would have done the same thing too. And that all goes back to just one of the things. I meant to share it with you. I don't know if you happen. Everybody should kind of Google what's his name, Chris Cuomo, who used to be on, I don't know, CNN or something, but now he's on News Nation. But he did this little short at the DNC where he's pointing up to all the box seats
Hmm.
in the arena there, and his whole point was talking about people are talking about Democrats are going and they're going to support the everyday person and middle class and blah blah blah. Look at all these box seats up there. Each one of those costs some person or a company 500,000, million and a half dollars to get their box seats. And it
Yep.
kind of comes back to, again, for both sides, and Republicans have the same thing. They have their box seats, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's just, they're the ones that are pulling the strings, folks.
Yeah.
It's like, and it kind of plays into that whole, what you're bringing up. It plays into this whole thing that, this is all kind of rigged. It's good. You can say all the nice things you want as a politician, but they're all playing a game.
Yeah. But I would go back and introduce this idea too, because not long ago, when Obama ran for the first time for the Democrats, Hillary Clinton she was the pick. She was going to win. She was going to be it. But she couldn't win the primary. Obama did. And even when Trump ran the first time back in 16, it was going to be the Bushes, or it was going to be Mitt Romney, or it was going to be somebody else, but there was an actual primary, and
Yeah.
uh, you know, Trump got in. And now Trump is basically an incumbent. He's got a huge advantage, but he was still challenged and could have, something could have changed. And I put it to you that if you had had an actual real primary from the Democrats where everyone got a chance to vote in each state, I don't think they would have voted for Biden. They would have picked somebody else,
Yeah.
anybody else.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
and that's really where my concern comes in. It's that the
Well,
powers
they
that
were
be knew
voting
that
in the
Biden wouldn't.
early in the early states. They were voting against Biden. I mean, it
Right,
was it was really South Carolina through again pulling a lot of strings
right.
where he had his comeback. I mean, people were not excited about Biden.
Right, and even in the first time that he got nominated in 20, it's like he wins South Carolina, which obviously they have a some kind
Yeah.
of holdover, and
Yeah.
then they just think, okay, well that's it. Everybody just needs to unify behind Biden.
Yeah.
Done. And then this
Yeah.
time around, it was even worse. And so my only point is, again, is like as I say, going through. If you're gonna have a candidate who's no one has voted for in any kind of primary or had any kind of vetting or approval, and then they don't really run much of a campaign at all when they're actually campaigning for president, what does that mean? I mean, if the Democrats can do that, if they can just pick somebody out of the blue who, by and large, up till they were running for president, was considered an awful candidate, put them in position to run for office, then not have a campaign and just let the media tell everybody that she needs to win, and then she does. Well, what does that leave people who are voting? I mean,
Totally agree. The only devil's advocate thing I'll play there is to a point you made, which made me think, this was a couple months ago, or probably a couple months ago, when you said, hey, we can't forget the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are private organizations.
yeah,
They're basically private businesses. So
yeah,
if you put it into that context, they can do whatever the hell they want.
right.
It's like,
But what I'm talking about though is once you get that in your head that they can do anything that they want,
yeah.
and that what they're doing is making a mockery of
Oh,
our
totally.
voting in this country. And that goes back to where we're always talking about third parties. There needs to be an interjection of something, anything that says, look, this system, the way it's working, has to change. There has to be something different.
Yep.
Because again, if Harris wins this election, and I personally think that she will, if she wins this election, don't people have to start admitting that the Republican Party is a dead entity? I mean, if the Republicans cannot win this election, considering all the things that have gone on, including Trump getting shot in the ear, if they can't win this time around, then why is there any reasonable expectation that they'll ever win anything again? And then you're at the point where it's like, well, why is if you're going to throw your vote away on the Republicans, why not throw your vote away on something that's much more useful, like a third party, until
Absolutely.
something comes along that can actually start to restore balance to what's going on?
Yeah.
Because I just feel like it's such a strange election with the way things have gone on, with both candidates being, objectively pretty
Right.
awful, that, at some point people have to start coming around to the idea, okay, the only option for us is to change things because what we're
Exactly.
doing now just it clearly doesn't work. It
Right.
clearly doesn't work.
Right. Well, and again, I think it can be simple things too, like open primaries
Yeah.
and ranked choice voting or whatever. There's lots of different avenues to go down.
Yeah.
The challenge with all those things, as we continue to experience, is how do you remove that death grip these two parties have
Yeah.
on the machinery?
Yeah. And that
And
and that's
that is the number one issue.
yeah.
We got
And
to figure out a way. And, I think we all keep holding out hope that there's going to be a good third party legitimate candidate.
hmm.
Um, and, it seems like every time, like the RFK thing has just kind of gone totally off the rails,
Yeah, who
you
knows what's
know?
wrong with that now?
Right? And that's happened obviously several times in the past, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully now, because I think people are upset. I mean, obviously there's a group of Republicans that don't feel the Republican Party represents them anymore.
Yeah.
I think there's a group of Democrats that agree with what you're saying, that they're upset about the whole because they're not big Kamala fans, because when you think about when she was actually trying to run for president,
Very
it,
unpopular.
it was she was very unpopular. And so maybe those folks will kind of, and obviously the growth in independence continues to just go up
Yeah.
and up and up and up, that somebody somehow above our pay grade
Hmm.
will start organizing to something that's legitimate, because you do need that structure. I mean, we've
Yeah.
talked about it. You do need that structure. It's great that we're all independents, but you do need that structure, to that umbrella to fall under.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the reasons I was bringing up, the whole way that the system has sort of fallen apart in this particular election, is
Yeah,
that for anything to happen, I think there's this huge first step, which is there has to be an awakening of enough people to look at it and say, okay, it's the Republicans, Democrats, none of that matters anymore. This thing is broken. There
totally.
has to be something new because again, and I've said this, many times to many people, I still feel like there's too many people out there that think the Democrats are okay. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
well, things are sort of horrible, but the Democrats are okay, so it's fine. They can just stay the way they are. But they are not okay. And as I
No.
say, once you see how the structure of this election is taking place, I'm just hoping there's enough people who start to wake up and say, okay, this situation is not okay anymore. We can't just be like it. Things are fine if we just keep voting for the Democrats. No, no,
Yeah.
it's not. It's
No.
definitely not fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's one of these situations where more is better, in terms of more
Yeah,
parties is better. I mean, that's not always the truth, true in what some circumstances, but in the case of elections, and that really goes top to bottom. The local elections, like even here in Vista, most of the districts that are going to be coming up for election, there's only two candidates, right?
yeah,
And and again, it's a whole different scenario. I think they are much more, obviously more approachable. They both tend to be more centric because they have to be,
yeah,
because, but at the same time, it's like, man, for my district, I wish I had three or four candidates to choose from,
yeah,
even for a city council or county,
yeah,
council, whatever. Let alone, I mean, at least three for president. You
yeah.
know,
I think that if you really want to have an exchange of ideas, three is the minimum. Until
yeah,
then, you're just going to be like, well, that person is Hitler.
right,
It's like, well, okay, I can't vote for Hitler, so I guess I'm voting for you.
right,
And it's like when it comes to a binary choice like this, it's too easy to simply demonize your opponent and not really stand for anything or
right,
have any ideas.
right.
And that's kind of where we are. And as I say, there's got to be an awakening to that. There's got to be like people coming around to the idea that, hey, look, I've been lied to enough by the media, by everyone, that I just don't believe any of this stuff anymore. We need to do something different.
Yeah.
And
Well,
hopefully that's what happened.
I do get a sense there is some of that starting to happen more and
I do
more.
too, actually. Yeah.
And so I do look somewhat optimistic about that. I mean, the fact that you and I are doing this,
Oh, I know it's crazy.
we're certainly not alone, and that's a good thing that people are trying to exchange ideas and kind of put the thought out there that you know we do need to come up with some other solutions here. Um, and more and more states are doing open primaries, and it's a slow process. There's have you heard of the first time I'd heard about it, this, what's it called, something compact, where there's like 12 or 13 states now that have signed this compact
Yeah, I think I know
for
what you're
the
talking about.
popular vote for
Yeah.
president. And I haven't really studied it much yet, but I want to. I think it's an interesting idea that, hey, regardless of, how the vote splits out, whoever gets the most popular votes, that's kind of where our votes will go as a state.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
It's
an
actually,
interesting idea. So they get to the point of whoever gets the most votes across the country actually will win, not through the electoral college process.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
that's where it runs into a real wall, though, a constitutional wall, because the idea is that the states are basically saying we will assign our electors
mhm,
to whichever candidate gets the most in the popular vote.
right,
Which, on its face, if you want to do it, if you wanted to create your own nation and do it that way,
right.
perfectly sensible thing to do. The only problem is that the idea is that the electors are loyal to a particular candidate. The state just can't come along and say, "Oh, sorry, you have to vote for this person or that person." It's not the state that decides the electors; it's the candidate.
Right.
So it's like they can
Yeah.
try it, but as soon as they attempt
Oh,
to
yeah.
implement it, they'll get sued into oblivion. I mean,
Oh, yeah. No, no, I
it'd be
know
crazy.
that. But I mean, I give them credit for trying to think some way
Yeah,
around the electoral college because I think it is frustrating that because our votes are all diminished as a result of the electoral college when, we already know Kamala's going to win California and,
yeah,
you know, Trump is going to win Alabama,
right.
all these things, right? So, and it comes down to those few 100,000 votes across the country that actually decide. And
Yeah.
that system sucks. So,
Well, I don't know. I always have kind of misgivings about the electoral college because first of all, I think it's basically an outdated idea. I mean, the idea of the
oh,
electoral college was is that, if you were living in Florida
right,
in, 1801,
right,
that you didn't really have any way to transmit your vote,
right.
into Washington. So what do you do? Well, you elect an elector who
Yep,
gets on his horse and rides to Washington and says, "Well,
right.
I represent all the votes of these people in this area and I vote for so and so."
Yeah.
And so it's like that's kind of the reason that it
Oh, yeah,
existed.
exactly.
So it's like it doesn't really make much difference anymore now. So I
No,
mean, you could technically get rid of it, but it's like it's the whole thing about, well, to do that you have to literally have like a constitutional amendment to change it, and
right. Which it
no
won't
reason
happen.
to vote for that. So it's kind of one of these weird things.
Well,
I mean,
to your point, Republicans would never vote for it because
oh no, not in a million years.
they're never going to vote for it. And so while it's a great idea to get rid of the electoral college, it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah,
Not at least not in the structure that we have now. Again, if we had true three or four parties around where
mm,
you could really drive some reforms and maybe get to a point where um, you could have a constitutional discussion, then maybe. But outside of that, it's not going
yeah.
to happen.
Well, as I say, I think there's the whole idea of republicanism is that the states you know matter as an entity, which is why every
Right.
state has two senators, and
Yep.
it's like it's a very interesting political discussion to be like, okay, well, it should be some way or it should be some other way. I mean, personally, I've always actually kind of liked some of those things, especially the states having two senators,
Oh yeah.
because it's one thing to have a huge population in, say, New York City, and it would be nice to be able to boss around all the farmers and tell them they have to grow food for
Yes.
you.
No, I think
But
it's brilliant.
I think that that's not necessarily really the best way to go about it. So the fact that the places that are more rural but still are very important actually have some kind of representation in things,
Yes.
really matters. And I think you can look at the electoral college in some sense like that. Like, these states, you still have to win them. They matter because
Right.
I mean, like Wyoming, which has only one congressional representative, which means I think the population of Wyoming is less than 1 million.
Right. It is.
And so it's like, well, does
Yeah.
Wyoming just, not matter because it
Right.
just doesn't have enough people? So, I mean, again, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of arguments you could probably make pro or con for that, but it is a really interesting one.
Yeah, no, but no, I totally agree. There's been, I mean, I've heard a lot of people argue that places like California and stuff should have more than two senators. It's like, no, I mean that is the beauty of the two houses. That
Yeah,
you do get, a true equal vote at one, at least within one level. Then you have the House of Representatives that really does reflect more the population aspect of it.
yeah,
So I that the only rational discussions these days that does go on, not that there's a lot anywhere, is in the Senate. So, you
yeah,
know, that's your only hope to have actual, real meaningful discussions these days, just because things are so fractured. So,
yeah,
no, I hear you on that. It's just, I don't know. I guess the reverse of that logic too, though, is now, because of the Electoral College, so much attention is applied to those few states. That's
yeah,
where they spend all their time campaigning because they know, hey,
yeah,
Kamala, like, she's not going to spend a ton of time in California. Why would she? She's got that one wrapped up, right? And so so they get actually an overabundance of attention paid to them just as a result of that.
yeah.
So
And
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing either. It's just it is what it is.
but that's also one of the things that I hope eventually, people will start to wake up is to the neglect that they receive from their government. If
Yep.
you had more parties that could throw a monkey wrench into the electoral college, could throw a monkey wrench into congressional seats, Senate races, anything like that, then all of a sudden you can't just be like, you can't take people for granted. I mean,
Exactly.
one of the things that I think is a real problem for the minority communities, especially the Black community in the United States, is that when you look at voting, Blacks vote basically like 98% of the time for Democrats.
Right.
So if you're the Democrats and you know that you're going to get 98% of any demographic, you don't care anymore. You just like, whatever.
Right.
Throw 'em a bone every now and again. They're still all going to vote for you. So you don't care. Doesn't matter. And so if you look at, like, one of the things that I think about recently is like food deserts. I mean, that is a brutal problem. I mean,
Really.
if you're living in a place where the local grocery store just packed up and moved, and you're
Yep.
living in a giant asphalt pit because you're surrounded in this giant city, it's not like you can grow your own food, and then
Right.
the market leaves. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, you
Right.
don't. It's not like you can just be like, well, I guess I just won't eat.
Right.
You're going to have to do something, go somewhere. And if you have to go a long way out of your way to go get food, think about the fuel cost, the environmental cost, the time, the disruption of your life, all these things. So I think that is a huge, huge issue that really needs to be addressed. In the United States, you should not be living in a place where you don't have access to decent food. And that's
Exactly.
crazy. But what are the Democrats doing about it in these big cities, like Los Angeles?
Right.
Nothing. They don't care because they know that they're going to get the votes from those areas anyway. It doesn't matter to them. And I just say that, it's like I get that maybe people living in the city have had it with the Republicans. They're just not going to vote for them. But they can't keep voting for the Democrats
No.
because as long as they keep voting for the Democrats, none of this stuff will ever, ever get fixed. And so
Yep.
there's got to be something, right? Which is why California to me has always been the perfect place to start a new party. Even if
Yeah.
each state started a new party that were all different from each other, it would still break up the monopolies, and so something like that has got to happen. But before it can happen, people need to wake up to the reality of just how badly they're being lied to and abused by the people they keep putting into office.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and no, that's a great example. With the food deserts and all that, that those groups of people, again, have been lied to in a lot of respects,
Yeah,
and they should be big proponents of a third party
yeah,
because
that's what I hope.
they're not getting there. they're not getting a fair deal on a
Not at
lot of
all.
things,
Not at
a
all.
lot of things,
I mean, if you
and
look
that
at the
has nothing to do with the parties. I mean, they're
right,
gonna both parties are gonna screw them.
right. But if you look at, I mean, when you look at like, when you look at things that go on the ends of inner city crime rates, inner city, cost of living, inner city educational policies, the places that have the highest population density, where the most people are getting the worst of everything.
Yeah,
But if you look at any city, it's like 100% one party or the other. Boom, done. We
right.
just this city votes this way. And it's like you're killing yourself. You're destroying your chances of having anything good come your way, of having any kind of positive change, of having any kind of improvement or upward mobility or anything else, because you've created a situation by always voting the same way for the same people that they're just never going to care about you at all. You can rant and rave and scream, and they'll be like, "Fine, whatever. We'll throw you a subsidy of some sort,"
Right.
because they know that they're going to get all the votes anyway. That
Yep.
has to change.
Yep. Yep. No, I hear you. Well, we better leave it there for now, but that's good discussion. I mean, the bottom line of it is, I hear you. I just really do hope people are listening and really thinking about what they're being told by
Yeah,
both sides, and that the only way we got to break this log jam, and you got to have some kind of a wedge. That
right.
has a third party is the only way to go about it right now.
Yep. No, as I say, and again, just going back to the very, very beginning of the show, having conversations like this, it make being forced to think about things, talking to people who don't necessarily we don't necessarily always agree on everything,
No.
but it's like it's good. I just hope more and more people do it. I hope more and more people are willing to say, "Hey, look, let's just talk about some of these things.
Yep.
What are we doing? Isn't there some
Yep.
way to change things?" So, I mean, I think it's great. I'm glad we're doing it, and I hope more people do it too.
Absolutely. All righty there. We'll leave her there and we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good.
Talk to you later.
See you
Bye.
soon. Bye.